I didn't know that we were like the 5th group to ever do it successfully.
Right.
I didn't know that. I mean, I just assumed it was something people did, you know? I'm not tapped into the spearfishing world by any. I've never done it. I've never free dove. And what I'm doing is far different, you know, in the diving world.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. For those of you out there that are truck guys like me, I want to talk to you about one of our newest sponsors, Decked. If you don't know Decked, they make bomb-proof drawer systems to keep your gear organized and safely locked away in the back of your truck. Clothes, rifles, packs, kill kits can all get organized and at the ready so you don't get to your hunting spot and waste time trying to find stuff. We all know that guy. Don't be that guy. They also have a line of storage cases that fit perfectly in the drawers. We use them for organizing ammunition, knives, glassing equipment, extra clothing, and camping stuff. You can get a 2-drawer system for all dimensions of full-size truck beds, or a single drawer system that fits mid-size truck beds. And, maybe best of all, they're all made in the USA. So, get decked and get after it. Check them out at decked.com. Shipping is always free. What's a sea cucumber?
It's basically a water slug, man. They are related to starfish and sea urchins.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of a gelatinous water balloon that walks on the bottom of the ocean.
And what oceans do they live in?
So
There's got to be a bunch of different kinds of them, I'd assume.
So yeah, I don't know how many varieties there are, but there's a lot.
Yeah.
And they're found all over the world. So I think in all of the oceans is my understanding, although I'm only familiar with the ones in the North Pacific.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me about it. Like, give me the rundown on sea cucumbers, the commercial harvesting, the sustainability, what people do with them, all that.
So my experience is just with Alaska, through state of Alaska. It's a dive industry. We're diving to the bottom and picking them up by hand and putting them in a bag one at a time.
And what people have heard a lot of from me is free diving, where I'm wearing big long fins, and masks, snorkel, wetsuit, weight belt, and kicking down to the bottom. What the diving you're talking about is relatively specific.
Yeah, it's a far different thing. So it's considered hookah. We're diving off of an airline. And I wear a full face mask, a dry suit, and 70 pounds of lead. We're no fins.
70 pounds of lead.
70 pounds of lead.
How do you have that distributed?
All on a weight belt, in a commercial weight belt with a release.
Okay.
Wear it high on your hips.
Wow. That's got to hurt.
On the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the bottom, if it's fitted right, it's just part of the deal.
Yeah.
It's a lot of equipment. So I still wear an air tank, a small one. It just has a bailout.
Okay.
I've got a manifold on my harness. So you wear a backpack style harness that's got D-rings on your chest where you're clipping your bags off to. You clip your airline off to that because your tender can pull you back to the boat, or you can pull on the boat, and you don't want that or you can get tangled up.
Yeah.
You don't want any pulling on your mask. So you clip, to your harness off a D-ring on the line, and then it comes up to your mask.
So you've got a hose connecting you to some kind of tank on the boat that's mixing the air?
So it's we have a really good system. We have everything's hydraulically driven off the main engine of the boat.
Okay.
So 2 hydraulic PTOs off the cam-driven PTOs. It's a Detroit.
PTO's like the spinny thing on the back of a tractor that makes implements work.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So we engage 2 PTOs that are running hydraulic systems. We have a cooler that's basically I don't know what it is, a couple hundred feet of coiled copper line that we put over the side in the water to keep our system cold because we're running. So we also, I don't, but the boat operates as a GUI duck dive boat as well, where we're using, so 2 systems. One runs an air compressor that's below deck to a tank. So it draws fresh air intake off the compressor. And then we have a nitrox mixing system. So we buy Aviator's oxygen in the large K size, like looks like a welding bottle or whatever, a gas bottle. And we have 3 of those on the back deck with a regulator.
So it's taking the regular atmosphere from the sea, compressing that, and then adding oxygen to it?
Yeah, it's enriched oxygen. So we're usually setting for 32%.
And normal atmosphere oxygen is like 8% or something?
No, I think it's in the 20s.
It's in the 20s.
22 or 23.
Okay. Yeah.
I know that when I'm doing it every day because you zero your meter at atmospheric and then test what we're compressing.
Okay. So are you near shore at this point?
So Southeast Alaska, for people that don't know, is like basically a giant series of islands, peninsulas, bays. Prince of Wales Island's not a huge island, but it is a huge island. I think it's the second biggest in the country or something.
Yeah,
behind the big island of Hawaii.
It takes a minute to drive across Prince of Wales.
Yeah, and it's got a massive amount of shoreline because it's jagged bays, little crooks, outlying islands. We dive all over that southeast area. So sometimes we're based out of Ketchikan, sometimes we're based out of like the Craig side.
Okay.
All the way up to Sitka. So a lot of what we do is, it's near shore, but it might be a day boat ride or a 12-hour boat ride or whatever.
Gotcha.
To the spots.
And then how deep of water are you dropping down into?
So the shallower the better because you can stay down longer and work more. But I would say average is like 40.
Okay.
I've been to 90 kind of by mistake. We kind of do we do 70s and 80s and so we're dry suit diving. We're not in wetsuits, and you start getting a lot of weird pressures and
how do you equalize with a full face mask?
So there's a V-shaped block in your mask that sits just below your nose.
Okay.
Different masks have different. So my dad's mask actually has a lever that flips a little deal in and plugs your nose.
Okay.
Mine just has a V-shaped rubber block that sits just below your nose, and you palm the whole mask and shove it into your face.
Okay.
And clear.
Yeah, clear your ears.
Yeah, clear your ears.
Wow. Okay. So you're somewhere between 40 and 90 feet of water, walking around on the bottom of the ocean in Southeast Alaska. I imagine water temperatures are in the 50s.
Oh, when we start in October, they are. When we finish in January, like 42 to 45.
Yeah, real cold water.
Yeah. There's been days that in the back bays that we're getting into that they'll have freshwater streams that run into them, and the fresh water stays on top a little bit before it mixes, and we'll break ice with the boat.
Are sea cucumbers hard to find?
Not necessarily. So in the good areas, they're plentiful, man. You get them, you get your pounds in a day, no problem. In the tougher areas, it's a lot of running around. So we spend a day or two before each opener in our areas with an underwater camera surveying and just marking spots, creating waypoints.
Commercial fishing in Alaska is the most regulated fishery I know of anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And any time that you have a commercial interest, there's going to be all kinds of political tension around it, and there is all that. But when we're talking about openers in Alaska for fish, some of those openers could only be a couple hours long.
Yeah.
And you've got boats that are sitting there waiting, and then SATCOM or radio goes out and says, this is the opener, this is the quota or the time period, and everybody just goes like crazy. Is it like that for sea cucumbers?
Similar. So no SATCOM or radio transmissions. Where when they open the season, there's within a region, they break it up into areas like maybe this sound or this bay, and they give real defined borders. And and then there's a quota for pounds, what the state defines as sustainable harvest, and it's a 3-year rotation. So what we dove last year, we won't dive again for 3 years.
Okay. Is that about how old the sea cucumbers are?
I don't know the age of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's partially that. It just kind of lets the area recover.
Yeah.
After a commercial harvest. So the state fisheries board and the local level Fish and Game, when the quota is defined, they then say, okay, we think we're going to have this many divers. We think we're going to have this much pressure. Generally, your areas are open Monday at 8 a.m. till 2 p.m., Tuesday 8 to noon.
Okay.
Now, as the season progresses, and even actually early on, some of the really good areas, they're going to say you only get Monday. No, there's no Tuesday. Or, and then as the quota diminishes, they can see, okay, there's been 10 boats with 15 divers working this area. They're averaging this many pounds a week out of the area. We don't have enough quota for the year left to sustain that. So they'll cut our window back. So maybe instead of the day and a half, you get 1 day, or maybe they just give you a half a day. Or the opposite happens. Some of these bigger areas that aren't getting the pressure, they want to take the quota, because that's what's sustainable. That's the goal for the fishery, that is we want to pull that quota out and not have the fishery go into March or April or May. Ideally, they kind of, I think, want to have cucumbers done by the Christmas break.
Mm-hmm.
Usually we're going into January and sometimes February, but they want to get that quota before they go down deeper in the summers and do some different things. So they want to get that quota, and that's what it's regulated for. So they'll do things like in the slower areas, they'll add, so maybe you get 2 full days. Or maybe they'll say, so it's a 2,000 pound a week per diver limit. So maybe they'll say, hey, 2,500 pounds a diver, 2 full days. Or sometimes I've even seen it in the short period of time I've been doing it. I've seen it where they'll go like 2.5 days.
Yeah. And
a 2,500 pound, guys, go get them.
Right.
But generally when we're getting to that point where they're adding, it's because it's tough. Guys weren't getting 2,000. So raising it to 2,500, they still couldn't get it.
Gotcha.
They couldn't get 2,000. So
what's a big day for you?
2,000 pounds.
2,000 pounds for you as an individual?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're picking up 2,000 pounds of sea cucumbers off the ocean floor in a day.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And that's per diver. And we run 2 divers on the boat. My dad and I are
your dad sounds like such a legend.
In his own world, absolutely. Yeah. We try not to tell him that. His head gets real big,
The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Nick's Handmade Boots, a family-owned company in Spokane, Washington. For many of my listeners, you have waited and prepared all year for this. Whether your pursuit is with a rifle or a bow, early or late season, big game or birds, another hunting season is finally upon us. Nick's Boots and the Six Ranch want to wish you luck as you head out into the field. This season, I'm wearing the Nick's Boots Game Breakers beginning with the archery elk season. Having worn this boot throughout the summer around the Six Ranch, I continue to be impressed with how quiet the boot is. The rough-out leather laces, and 365 stitch-down construction create a simple boot that is supportive, durable, comfortable, and most importantly, quieter than most synthetic hunting boots. For 60 years, Nick's has been building work boots for wildland firefighters, tradespeople, hunters, and ranchers, as well as heritage styles for anyone who values quality footwear made in America. Visit nicksboots.com today to find your next pair of high-quality American-made work boots. Add a pair of boots and a work belt to your cart and use the code 6RANCH. That's the number 6 and the word ranch to receive the belt for free.
It's kind of common practice after the fishery for the guys to go have a drink at one of the local places, and it'll be most of the dive fleet will be in there. And I was having a drink one night, and a young diver. I was still tending. I wasn't diving yet. He walked up to me and he goes, "Are you Scott's son?" And I go, "Hey, yeah, man." He goes, "Your dad's an absolute legend in this industry. He's literally in books." And I went back and I told my dad that the next morning, and he goes, "Listen, if that ever happens again, you can't tell me that. I can't handle that kind of ego."
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, he's a big personality and a lot of fun.
Yeah.
He kind of pioneered not the sea cucumber dive industry, but the geoduck dive industry in Alaska. Him and his group. It was Washington guys that went up and kind of formed the commission. So the shellfish, not shellfish.
Let me interrupt you before we get into gooey ducks.
Okay.
What does a sea cucumber look like? How big are they?
So I've picked them that look like little Gherkins pickles, the size of your fingers.
Yeah.
That you don't want those.
Yeah.
There's really not much to process there, and I don't know how many it would take to get 2,000 pounds. But I mean, when they're so small, we carry net bags. It's a shrimp netting, and the holes are maybe an inch.
Yeah. They fall through the net.
When they're falling through the net, man, you go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I've also picked them that are 24 inches long and as big around as a football.
Do they have a shell, or are they soft?
No, they're soft. They're kind of a gelatinous, like rubbery feeling, and they're full of water.
Huh.
So the tender actually, we'll load bags up on the bottom and send them up, and the tender dumps them into a big tote with drain holes in it, and they take a razor knife and cut a 1-inch slit in the bottom of every one before they go into the bags, because you have to drain the water. You can't sell the water weight.
Right.
So everyone gets cut before they go into the totes.
And are they still alive at that point?
Yeah.
And is it the type of thing where they need to be kept alive until they're processed for food? Or are they flash frozen?
No, they're cooked. But no, as we drain them, I assume they're not.
Yeah.
They're dead once you drain them.
Right.
They don't have a brain, so I don't know how to tell. They don't have eyes. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, like, oh, no heartbeat, like it's dead. I don't.
It's a weird little animal.
Yeah, it's a weird little animal.
And then what's the market for them?
Mostly Asia.
And they're eating them.
They're eating them. So they eat the muscle out of them. There's so if you picture like a football-shaped water balloon, it's got weird spikes on the outside of it, and they vary in color. You get kind of blondes and darker ones in our area. You slice it down the center, open it up. Now you've got it laying flat. There's strips of muscle, maybe as big as your pinky or so in there, and you kind of just scrape them out with a putty knife. And it's the consistency of clam, like if you've had clam strips, but pretty much flavorless. But it's an Asian delicacy. People really love it, and then they cook the skins and use them for, everything from cosmetics to cancer research to, I think, anything that you need like a protein for.
Gotcha.
There's a laundry list of stuff that I sell them at the dock. I don't do any of that.
Right.
But I've kind of looked into it a little bit because it's interesting. And they pack them and yeah. So mostly it's a process fishery. They're processing and freezing them and packing them and selling them.
What's a gooey duck?
The largest burrowing clam in the world.
The largest burrowing clam in the world, and they are a bit phallic looking.
Yeah. So actually, that's part of the market is, so most, I'm going to say 80-90% of the gooey duck market is China, and they go into the wet markets that we've all heard so much about in the last few years. And they're sold live. So when we dig a gooey duck in southeast Alaska, the tender puts a heavy rubber band around every shell and stacks them in, we call cages. They're milk crates. The rubber band puts pressure on the shell like the sand and keeps their stress level down. And so when we offload on a Wednesday, they are reboxed, taken to Alaska air cargo, and they're in China Thursday or Friday. And then they go into wet tanks live and are sold live.
And So a lot of people are using these as some type of virility aphrodisiac.
I think
type
that's the
thing.
thought process in it.
Dude, China's so weird about that stuff.
Yeah.
There's so many things that get traced back to Chinese medicine for some type of virility enhancement, and it's been the cause of the fall of species around the world, right? If you look at rhinos or tigers, I mean, the list kind of goes on and on. Actually, the word Viagra comes from an Indian, like subcontinent of India word for tiger.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
So, like, this whole thing about virility, especially in Asia, just keeps getting linked back to animals, and whether that's like bear gallbladders or, I mean, the list kind of goes on, and to do it with an animal that's sustainable, like a gooey duck, and it's regulated, that's much better than something that's getting poached someplace else where you have a really fragile population for it.
Absolutely. And I think that
I've eaten them too. I didn't notice anything.
yeah, same. I think that you see the older generation, I think, had that belief system.
Yeah.
And the younger generation, it's the sushi market.
Gotcha.
So we have a buyer that we work with. He's been a diver a long time, and he's kind of got into doing the middleman piece as well. So he's traveled all over, kind of like nurturing these markets and clientele relationships. So he's gone to Vegas, where they're getting, in New York City, into these high-end sushi restaurants to try to build his domestic market for when China's market's soft. And they'll, you get 2 or 3 slices of gooey duck on a piece of, 1/8-inch slices of the neck. The neck's 1.5 inches, 2 inches around. And they take it long ways and slice it into little thin slices and put it over a piece of rice, and you might get 3 or 4 of them, and it'd be $100.
Wow.
I don't know how many 1/8-inch slices you can get out of a gooey duck neck, but it's a lot.
Yeah. Because how long are they? Not to get too personal here.
Yeah. From 6 inches to the biggest ones I've ever seen are actually in a photograph of my dad when he was younger, and he's holding them with his arms above his shoulders, and the shells are by his knees. So 36-inch necks.
Wow.
And those are the biggest ones he's ever seen, and he's I think he's dug over 1 million pounds.
It's for sure not my favorite piece of seafood. I could go the rest of my life without eating them and be kind of stoked.
Yeah, it's good certain ways. I've had it like smoked and canned. It's okay. Clam chowder's great. Grind it up.
Sure.
But that's when I bring it home. That's kind of what it gets turned into.
Yeah.
My dad raves about some pickled gooey duck that he had, and he's been trying to figure out a recipe. We've never got it right. But he had some one time that just, I mean, he's still chasing that.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's clam. You can make clam strips out of it. We've made fritters. I mean, but in the end, so in the beginning of the fishery, when my dad started doing it in Washington, it was all a process fishery. So it didn't matter if the shells got broken when you were digging them. You weren't rubber banding them because they were all going and getting ground up. And that's what was going in your McCormick or Nally's or whatever clam chowder that you buy in the can. Campbell's clam chowder or whatever, Yeah. Now it's transitioned into the live market because the value is so much higher.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, so you're doing all this crazy diving for stuff in Alaska. It's uncommon for people to work in a commercial harvest fishery as well as a recreational fishery.
Yeah.
So you kind of live in both worlds there. My understanding is that you guide out here on the coast. Right now we are on Otter Rock, Devil's Punch Bowl, just outside Newport, Oregon. Absolutely beautiful spot. Had a hell of an adventure yesterday. We're going to get into that. But you guide out here for halibut, coho salmon, crab, albacore tuna, rockfish.
Yeah.
You guide on the Columbia for walleye, salmon, sturgeon.
Sturgeon, yeah.
Steelhead?
Unfortunately, we really don't have any anymore in the Columbia.
Yeah. It's
they're there.
Pretty thin.
But the season's so small, and you can't. you can't base a livelihood off if we might get a couple days to do it.
I quit guiding steelhead quite a while ago now.
Yeah.
And the last year that I did it, I was guiding on the Grand Ronde, and it, based on the creel surveys, it was 157 hours per fish.
Oof.
157 angler hours per fish. So then, a client rolls in and they book a 8-hour trip.
Yeah.
It's like, man, you got to know going into this that the odds of you hooking a fish, seeing a fish are very low. The odds of us landing a fish are extremely low. And it felt pretty dishonest for me to take people's money to offer that experience. And I know the goal isn't always to get a fish in your hand, right?
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing to stand in a river with fall colors and wave a spay rod around and do all that. That's great. But I also could see at the end of the day, when they hadn't touched a fish and they'd worked really hard, that there was some disappointment there.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel good about that.
Yeah. No, I understand that. And yeah, I see the same thing. I want to be successful. And we had a pretty decent wintertime fishery in the Columbia, close to where I live, in Hermiston area. And we'd have some good days. I mean, it wasn't uncommon to have double digit days. But that seems like it's kind of a thing of the past.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
Unfortunately it's changed.
Yeah. And it's not any one thing, right? People like to blame the one thing that they're mad about, but
yeah,
it takes a lot of things.
Yeah.
What am I missing? What else do you guide for?
I think you pretty much covered it.
Yeah. I've been salmon fishing with you, and I've been tuna fishing with you. When we salmon fished here a couple of years ago, we had a banger day. We caught limits of fish in short order. There's whales all around us.
Yeah.
It was a big ocean that day, but you handled your boat with experience, and yeah, it was good. I felt confident and comfortable out there with you, even though the ocean was big, which gave me the confidence to do what we did yesterday. So the albacore tuna fishery in Oregon is not that old. People have not been fishing for albacore out here forever.
No.
Relatively new fishery.
Yeah, there's guys on the dock, they're older guys in their 50s and 60s, but on the same dock my boat's moored on that were, the first handful of guys to do it in the sport fishery.
Yeah.
I know them. I think maybe you had gone up to the fish cleaning station, but one of them came down and talked to us yesterday and was fascinated by what we did. And he was,
yeah.
I mean, I know two guys off that dock that were, probably one of the first 20 to be doing it on, themselves.
Yeah. So, I mean, that shows it right there. Like the first people to fish for albacore here in Oregon are still alive and still fishing.
Yeah, we're still hanging out with them, fishing with them. Yeah.
So, brand new fishery, and we'll get into the albacore a little bit as a species. So, these are juvenile albacore.
Yeah.
And they sort of make a lap around the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, that's my understanding. They spawn and are born in the Japan region.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, based on kind of what I know from, my internet research, really is they kind of they drop south and cut across the Pacific, and then kind of up the Baja California coastline. I don't think there's much of an albacore fishery down there that I know of. I think that they're kind of offshore still when they're in that region.
Okay.
And up here where we're at, they're following the, that green water, blue water break because there's good feed in the green and they live in the blue.
So what is green water? What is blue water?
So it's just your chlorophyll break line.
Okay.
The green water is kind of like the way I view it, and there's probably a scientist that could explain this far better. But the way I view it is kind of your green water is like that Alaska streamline, that current line that comes down from the north, that's full of the bait fish, and that's where your salmon live and spend their lives. and it kind of comes down from the north, and the blue water current kind of swirls in the, the South Pacific, the equator, makes a big swirl, the same path as the albacore, essentially, south from Japan, down across, by the equator, comes up the Oregon, Washington coastline, and then cuts back across towards Japan. And that's kind of the cycle that the albacore do as well, is that they kind of follow that vortex, I guess,
And when you get into the blue water, it's visibly blue. It's stark. It's this deep vermilion blue that's very clear. It's visibly distinct. And then the green water is much the same. So as we're trolling in and out of those different zones, I noticed when I was reeling fish in, I'm sorting the line back and forth on the reel with my thumb so it doesn't stack up on one side. And I would notice green stripes coming off the line that were, staining the back of my hand and my shirt sleeve from that chlorophyll.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. It's interesting.
What's the average size of albacore here?
15 to 20.
15,
yeah.
20 pounds.
Yeah.
And 2 days ago, you caught one of the biggest albacore that's ever been caught here.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to
as far as recreationally, I'll brag for you.
I'm sure there's been bigger fish caught, but yeah, we landed a 36 on the scale, and it wasn't you hear, oh, we landed a 40 pounder, we landed a 30 pounder, and you look at it and you're like, yeah, man, that fish is 22. You know? They always look bigger than
sure.
And fishermen lie. That's a thing. We
no
exaggerate fish size.
Yeah.
This fish was they put it on the scale. The clients did. And just a spring scale in my boat, not a certified scale.
Okay, so on a not certified scale, but we're just ballparking it.
Yeah,
36-pound fish. It's a great big albacore.
Yeah, so we caught it on a hand line, and generally I just have the clients take a wrap and swing those fish into the boat. I don't gaff them, and it was a little bit chaotic. I had 3 clients, one wheelchair bound, so he's just in the seat running a rod. And we're tripled. We got both hand lines on and a rod on. So now I've got to clear the other lines by myself, the other 5 lines.
Yeah.
And keep the boat straight and kind of talk everybody through and gaff fish. And we kind of get set up in a position where we're okay. And I've got the gaff, and I'm going to help the guy with the rod and get his fish in. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw the handline fish kind of coming up past the boat as he's bringing them in. It's swimming past the boat. And I probably did the wrong thing as a guide. And I went, oh, don't lose that fish. The last thing you want to get excited once the fish is on the boat, because you get your clients all worked up, and then they panic. But we brought it up and put the gaff in it, and I immediately said, that's the biggest one I've ever seen in person.
Yeah.
And get it on the floor. We landed all 3 fish. Everything's great. I start immediately, because when you're in them, you're in them. So I start bringing the boat back up to speed, getting gear back out, and they go, hey, we want to weigh that one. We want to weigh that one. So they hung it on the scale, and the one guy's holding the scale with both hands with the fish hanging on it, and the other guy's trying to read the scale, and he goes, it's 36. And I go, no way. You got to look at that again. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's like, what are we using the U.S. side of the scale? Like, what do we got going on here? And 36 pounds.
Wow.
I put it, I have a brute trash can on the back of the boat that we on the platform that we use for a bleed bucket. And your average tuna, the tail sticks out 2, 3, 4 inches. This one stuck out like 18.
Yeah.
It was an impressive fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job. So you called me about a month ago and said, hey, man, you want to go spearfishing for albacore? And I tried to come out just to rod and reel fish albacore last year, but Hurricane Hillary came up and kind of furked up the end of the season for everybody. I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what did I just sign up for? So I started doing a little bit of research, and the research is coming up dry. If you go to YouTube and type in spearfishing for albacore, you come up with nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Then you have to start digging into forums, which is an unholy hell that nobody should ever have to subject themselves to.
Yeah.
And you find little references and rumors here and there. I start calling around to different divers, and they're like, yeah, I mean, I suppose you could. I don't know anybody who has. And the more digging we did, we basically were able to come up with 4 documented instances where people had spearfished for albacore tuna successfully in Oregon.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, nobody knows how to do it. We're pioneering. Like, this has barely ever been done.
Yeah, something new.
Yeah. I talked to Dan Semrad from Oregon Freedive Company, an instructor who's a world-class spear fisherman and diver. And he said, yeah, we went out and we got 2. We would have lost one of them if we didn't have a bungee because it wasn't a good shot. He was pulling hard on the float, and we were able to, secure that fish with a second shot because we had a bungee. So you should get a bungee and do your best. Okay, like that's pretty limited advice.
Yeah.
I talked to Danny Bolton about it and, all of his different tuna experiences. And, he gave me some advice on how we should go about this. And then we started with just going out there and finding the fish. We had a 3.5-hour run to get out there.
Yeah.
The bar crossing was big. One of the boats we talked to yesterday had to go up to the bar, turn around, and come back 45 minutes later because, they're taking too big of waves over the bow. So we make it all the way out there successfully. Big run out to that blue water line. Not long after we decided to start fishing, we started catching fish.
Yeah.
Which is a classic Pathfinder sport fishing experience for me. It's like lines on the water, fish in the boat. It just happens like that.
We try to stay dialed in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got some fish in the boat. Everybody got to reel fish in. Poor Jesse was not feeling super great.
I actually really appreciated that he was chumming for us. It probably saved some money in bait.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Yeah.
Whatever he had for breakfast, I'm sure the albacore were fine with it too.
Yeah. And to be honest, I was a little bit woozy and beat up just from the trip out there, but we got into all of our dive gear, which was pretty comical as the boat was tossing around out there.
Yeah.
I fell down half a dozen times just trying to get my wetsuit on. Get belted up, and now we've got to go try and find some fish again. So we're all in our wetsuits in the boat. We hooked up a couple more fish, so I'm like in my wetsuit just, sweating it out, reeling fish in. And we decided that we were in an area that had some fish. We could see them on the surface occasionally. There were some birds around. I was like, all right, we just got to get in, get our faces in the water, and start looking for fish.
Yeah.
You guys started chumming from the boat and trying to jig some fish up, keeping an eye on us. Me, Greg Jones, Casey Husk all jump in the water. And, the typical blue water spearfishing approach is to chum, drop a flasher, lay there for hours on end and wait for fish to show up and then try and calmly take a drop on them and get them killed. We're in the water for about an hour. I got some pretty significant vertigo. So for folks, I want you to try to imagine this. I'm laying in the water, and the stuff that you can see in the water, which isn't much, it's like little sparkly stuff, the occasional jellyfish, it's moving with you, right? So it appears to not be moving at all because you're all subjected to the same forces in the water. However, there was like a 6-foot swell, so my body is getting pumped up and down, side to side, like I'm moving a lot.
Yeah.
Every few seconds. But my eyes are telling me that I'm not moving. My ears are telling me that I'm moving very much. And that's typically the recipe for getting pretty darn sick.
Yeah, that's how seasickness happens,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah. So your brain is saying, hey, I think we got poisoned. Let's go ahead and get rid of everything that's in our body right now. I didn't throw up, but I could definitely feel that coming. I was trying to swim over to where we saw some fish. And I was like, man, this is not going well. But as we came back to the boat where you guys were chumming, Casey goes, there's tuna right here. And he tried to take a surface shot, missed one, they boogied. But it's like, okay, we fired a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it almost felt like at that point we were semi-successful.
Totally.
I want to back up just a little bit. So I do a buddy trip every year with some of my good friends.
Yeah.
And Casey got the invite this year.
Yeah.
And I just said tongue in cheek, yeah, why don't we just troll him up and then put you in the water and let you shoot one? Because I know he's a pretty accomplished spear fisherman.
Yeah.
I've never done it with him, but I've heard his stories. I know he does it a lot. I know he's good at it. And he kind of, his reaction sort of shocked me. He kind of like got this stoned look on his face. He's like, you would let me do that? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure. He goes, that's been a dream for 13 years. He goes, I just never could get the ride out. He goes, I tried to put it together. We actually booked a guide 13 years ago, and he was all good with it until he realized spearfishing meant getting in the water, and then he told us absolutely not.
Yeah.
And at that time, he'd called every guide on the Oregon coast and tried to figure it out.
Yeah. And also, to be clear, this wasn't a guided trip.
No, it was not.
Yeah,
I don't guide spearfishing trips.
Yeah.
This was buddies trying something different.
Yeah. And, you know, we're trying to pioneer something here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Casey had this goal for a long time, and it just wasn't getting done. People aren't. It's just not a thing here yet.
And I didn't know any of that leading into it. I just kind of said it tongue in cheek, like, yeah, let's throw you in the water, you know.
Yeah.
And then when he's like, you know, then the kind of the wheels got in motion, and I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, if buddy trip, we can go out as friends and let you get in. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, James has been getting into spearfishing big time. Like, I know who to invite.
Yeah.
So that's when I reached out to you. And still then, I didn't know that we were like the fifth group to ever do it successfully.
Right.
I didn't know that. I mean, I just assumed it was something people did, you know. I'm not tapped into the spearfishing world by any. I've never done it. I've never free dove. And what I'm doing is far different, you know, in the diving world.
Well, I'm going to skip a couple steps here in the storytelling because this is a new thing. I do think that we got it figured out because we successfully killed an albacore tuna with a spear gun while diving. Folks, I'm not going to tell you how we did it.
That's fair. That's fair. I like that.
But we got it done.
Yeah.
And I think the next time, if we employ the same tactics that we did this time, we can throw 3 divers in the water and we can be stringing fish.
I agree with that. I think that we learned a lot yesterday. I started to tell you at breakfast, you know, this albacore thing, I still feel like I have a lot to learn. And I mean, I do okay with it, but it's like, it is a new fishery. Everyone's still learning.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're good at it, you're still learning. You never should stop learning. And to me, it's the biggest challenge. I was thinking about this on the ride in, you know, you're kind of quiet on the ride home and we got music playing. And as we're getting to where we can see shore and I can see the bridge and I can see the lighthouse coming into Newport, I have the thought that I have kind of the same thought every time I'm in that situation coming home from a tuna trip, that this is the adventure of a lifetime.
Yeah.
And I get to do it again tomorrow.
It also has a feeling for me of, wow, we actually survived that.
We did something big.
Because, you know, in all fairness, and this isn't, I don't want this to come across as like a lack of confidence in you, because if I wasn't confident in you and your boat, I wouldn't go.
Yeah.
But I went into this very much knowing, like, this is super dangerous. This could be the last thing I do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we were covered up in sharks a couple times. You know, I got stung in the lips by jellyfish so many times, my lips are still numb.
Yeah.
You've got a bunch of float lines in the water. You've got fish that you don't know about. It's blue water. Anything can happen. Yeah. Anything can show up in blue water.
Yeah.
You could have a freaking great white shark. You could have a blue marlin. Like, anything can show up there. And, yeah. But long story short, Casey Husk, you know, a civil servant, a fine human, firefighter, just a big, hairy American winning machine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the best way to describe Casey, I think.
Dude, he freaking got it done, and he strummed an albacore tuna with a spear gun on a dive, and we boated that thing. And then it was nothing but smiles and high fives, and everybody was kind of beat up and exhausted, and we're like, all right, now we're going to get back to trolling, and we're going to put some weight in the boat.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone was tired at that point. I mean, you know what? One thing you mentioned, it was rough going out, and we were probably an extra 45 minutes or an hour, and the bar was rough, and we started 45 minutes or an hour later than I would normally start a tuna trip. So I think we met at 5:30 and had like 8 wheelbarrows full of gear to go to the boat and ice. I normally have my clients meet me at the boat at 5 a.m.
Right.
And the boat's idling, iced up, ready to go.
Yeah.
I did that because of the bar. We were at a negative tide, and we were going to be crossing at max ebb, and I knew it was going to be tough. Sounds like from the reports it was tougher an hour earlier, but I didn't want to do it in the dark. I knew that.
And max ebb means that the tide is running out as fast as it's going to be running out.
The tide's running out, so like buoy number 7, the green can just past the bridge if you're headed out, had current rip lines behind it. I mean,
Yeah.
it looked like a river,
Yeah.
you know, and that's hitting a westerly swell. And when they meet, it's like if you take the tips of your fingers and push on them, they push up.
Yeah.
And they stack. And yeah, I mean, it was that way yesterday.
A westerly swell from the biggest ocean in the world.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I knew. I also know how to handle that. I mean, you take it slow. You got to know what your skill level and ability level is. And I knew that I had a pretty hardy crew, and if we took one over the bow and everyone got a little water down the back of their neck, they were going to be okay.
Yeah, we're all ready for it.
Yeah. But yeah, so we left a little late. So that being said, we got to the blue water late. I mean, 2 hours later because of the kind of combined. We had a decent south wind the day before, and that kind of left the ocean a little bit sloppy in the morning. And I mean, at one point we were running 23, 24 miles an hour, which is pretty dang good going out. And 10 minutes later, we were doing 12.
Yeah.
Just kind of trudging along, getting beat up a little. So, and it improved as the day went on, but I kind of say all that to say that at one point I looked down, and you guys were on your first dive, and I looked down, and it's noon.
Mm-hmm.
And generally I have when I'm guiding tuna trips, I mean, kind of 1:30 is when we're pulling lines,
Yeah.
you know? And at that point, I mean, we trolled up a few fish, but that's not what we came to do.
Right. I think we had like 4 or 5 fish in the boat.
Yeah. And that's great and all, but what in my mind, this trip was for spearfishing.
Yeah.
And I knew
We're going to try and do something big.
Yeah, we're going to try and do something big. And I even, I make appointments with the gals that fillet our fish. I let them know what my plan is for the next day, where we're going to be, what time. And the day before I brought in 31 tuna, and we had a real good day. 31 for 3 guys. We had tired arms at the end of the day, or they did.
Yeah.
My arms were fine. But yeah, we get to the end of the day, and I told her, I go, hey, she goes, you're doing tuna tomorrow, right? And I go, yeah, but I don't expect these kind of numbers. We're kind of doing something special. We're going to be doing something different. But when we got out there and it was noon and we were one dive down, I think you guys got out of the water at like 12:30.
Yeah.
And we had one shot that missed, and I'm thinking, boy, where'd the time go? You know what I mean? Normally I've got a whole day of fishing in at this point, and we haven't. And it was just kind of, the combination of factors. But I purposely didn't schedule a trip today knowing that we could spend some time.
Yeah.
Well,
after that, we tried a couple different things. We made some tweaks and adjustments, figured it out, got it done, and then it was awesome. Then we went back to trolling, and we ended up with 18 really nice fish.
Yeah.
And we've got a pile of fillets, and I'm going to be headed home and doing some pressure canning and putting up a winter's worth of tuna. And I'm
awesome.
I'm so grateful for that food and for the experience. Absolutely incredible, man. What's next for you in your season?
So we got another week and a half of this.
Yep.
And then we're doing the Columbia River Gorge, Kings.
Okay. King salmon.
Yep. And we'll kind of do that through September, and then it's time for me to go north and get in that cold water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go pick up
some sea slugs.
Sea slugs.
Yeah, slimy sea slugs. 2,000 pounds a day.
Nice.
So.
Well, that'll be good times, and I hope that I get to meet your dad and sit down and hear some of his stories, because it sounds like
man,
he's had wild adventures.
I like
on
to
the high seas all over.
I like to add in a few of the sayings that he kind of gives us regularly, but man, he's full of weird little monikers. Casey made the statement yesterday as we were out there that there's always a cost, and he wasn't talking about the expense.
Yeah.
He's talking about, this is hard.
Yeah.
I mean, what you guys did yesterday, what we did as a group is a hard thing.
Yeah.
It's a big adventure, and you're always sacrificing something, whether it's, all the way down to like time at home, on and on. Right. And, one thing my dad says on the boat when we're working is, there's always something wrong. Whether it's your home life because you're gone for 2 months, or it's your, mechanical, your suit's not quite right. We wear merino and fleece under our dry suits, and maybe that wadded up. I mean, something as simple as that.
Right.
There's always something wrong, but you just got to put it out of your mind and go to work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the hard-nosed commercial fishing way of looking at Casey's comment yesterday on a sport dive.
Yeah.
There's always something wrong. You just got to kind of clear your mind if you're going to get in the water, because you better be.
Just figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and anytime you're in the water, you have to kind of have your stuff together. You need to be all present. Because if you're in the water and you're worried about something else that's unrelated, things can go wrong. And any problem you could ever have is magnified probably by about 100 if you're on the bottom of the ocean,
We talked about a story at breakfast that I'm going to cover in detail in a future show, where some folks had got on a boat with an illegal outfitter who had a pinchy boat that wasn't seaworthy. They got out there, bilge pumps weren't working, the boat sank, and it wasn't far from here, right?
Yeah.
And they were doing the same thing. They were tuna fishing. The boat sank. They didn't have a working radio. Nobody knew where they were, and nobody even knew that this boat was out. It was 18 hours before they were rescued, and most of the party had died in the water. So you want to go with a good outfitter. You don't necessarily want to go with the least expensive outfitter.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And, you want to, don't just be committed to the trip either. Like, when you walk down that dock and look at the boat, that boat should be tidy. It should be clean. It should be organized with the gear squared away. The captain should talk to you about what the trip is going to be, about what the safety plan is, about where the safety equipment is, and you should have confidence that they know what they're doing and they're doing it with equipment that is going to stand up to the job.
Yeah. Another
thing that I very much appreciate you, which is why I'm willing to go into a risky situation with you to do it. And all of those risk factors are mitigated by your skill and experience in your equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A saying that I've kind of developed, as long as we're talking about sayings, is not all boat owners are boat captains.
Facts.
Yeah. It's the guys that, and we see it a lot in the river. I think, I'm maybe a beneficiary of it, but I think Oregon's barrier to entry into the guide industry is too low.
Yeah.
You do have to have a Coast Guard captain's license, but even that, now there's online schools that you can get that through, and I'm not a person that can learn online. I can go online and I can pass the tests, but at the end of the day, if you start asking me questions, I didn't learn anything.
Right.
I learned how to pass the test.
Sure. And while somebody's taking that test, they can have their phone out looking up the answers to every question.
Yeah, exactly.
What are we doing here?
I probably would get a lot of crap for saying this, but I think that, even not all guides are up to what the standard they should be.
There's no skill requirement to be a hunting guide in Oregon.
Yeah.
And I think that's a shame. And it's common in the lower 48 for that to be the case. In fact, the only lower 48 state that I can think of that has a skill requirement for guides is Maine. And it's tough.
Really?
It's tough to be a guide in Maine. So if somebody has a Maine guide license, they have skills that have actually been tested and developed.
Yeah.
And it's a real accomplishment.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a guide in Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, pick your state, I'm not saying that they're not great guides, because there's tremendous guides all over this country.
Yeah.
But just because you're a guide doesn't mean you're a good guide.
Yeah. And I want to make it clear that that's what I know a lot of really, really great fishing guides. A lot of guys are, far more experienced than I am. It's just that you want to maybe vet your guys. You
Yeah.
know what we're doing, and the group of guys that are kind of doing these bigger trips like we're doing is smaller, but you really want to make sure you're going with somebody that's, like you said, got their gear dialed in, knows how to read weather, knows how to read, I mean, what the tide's going to be doing, what the bar's going to look like in the morning, everything.
Yeah.
You know, and that's important. You know, I have a lot of fun with this, but I take it super seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, I limit my tuna trips to 4 people, but I'm taking 4 people 50 miles off the Oregon coast. And no matter how long I spend looking at satellite shots and weather reports and the NOAA website, sometimes they're all wrong. I mean, what's the old joke about the weatherman? You know, like it's the only person that can be wrong 80% of the time and still keep their job.
Right.
Sometimes things things change while you're out. You're a long ways out. We're 3 hours from shore.
Yeah.
Our boat riding was a little better. I think we were an hour and 20 minutes from shore on the way.
Yeah, we were
in.
scooting on the way back.
Yeah, that was great. But you know, and these trips are tough, and you know, I cancel or postpone a lot of trips, reschedule a lot of trips because of weather down here in the summers.
Which is just the nature of the beast.
It is,
Yeah.
but clients get upset sometimes. You know, they're here. Maybe they're only here for 1 week. They're on a family vacation, whatever it might be. And I have to explain to people, listen, this is how I pay my mortgage and feed my kids. Like, I want to go more than anybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I love it.
Right.
Like, beyond the financial aspect of it, like, it's my job. It's also my passion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to go more than you do. I guarantee it.
Right.
But if I'm saying we can't go, it's because I want to make sure you guys come home, you know, or at least are comfortable, you know, and have a good experience.
Yeah.
You know, I've laid it out for people sometimes that, like, hey, there's a difference between uncomfortable and unsafe. We're going to be uncomfortable, and if you guys are okay with that, we can do some near shore stuff. You know, I'm not going 50 miles uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But if we're gonna rockfish, you know, by the jetties or something, like, hey, we can go do it. If you guys will be totally safe, but it won't be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you guys understand that and you're good with it, I'm good to go. But I need you to know going into it what we're looking at. And yeah, it's just like I said, I think some people think that you're, I don't know, messing with them. It's the weirdest response in my mind, because I live in this world.
Right.
And they'll send me like, what do you mean the weather's going to be bad? It says it's going to be sunny. It's like, well, yeah, I don't care if it rains. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, put your rain jacket on.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm looking at, you know? So yeah, I always feel bad in this weird pressure when I have to cancel trips or reschedule trips with clients, but
That's normal, man.
Yeah.
I feel all that same stuff too.
Yeah.
And it feels terrible to tell somebody that you know is excited about going, we can't.
yeah.
And it's like an ego check, and it's really hard, but it's also the right decision.
Yeah.
And folks, if you trust your guide well enough to be willing to go with them, you need to trust them when they say that it's not safe to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's as
Absolutely.
simple as that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so if somebody wants to, not for spearfishing, but for rod and reel fishing, if somebody wants to book a trip for rockfish, halibut, crab, salmon, walleye, sturgeon, albacore, tuna, how do they do it?
So, all the social medias, Pathfinder Sport Fishing, pathfindersportfishing.com, and my cell number is 541-274-9387. Shoot me a text, give me a call.
Nice.
Phone numbers on the website, emails on the website.
Phone numbers on the side of the boat.
Phone numbers on the side of the boat, so I don't mind giving it out here either.
Nice.
Yeah, get a hold of me. I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, let's plan something, figure something out, and
Cool.
And you and I need to plan the next adventure too, man.
Always, man. Always an adventure when we get together.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I feel like we just cracked the seal on this thing.
I think so too. I think we need to do this again now that we know the program.
Yeah. I'm going to gear up differently. I know what to expect. I'm going to take some different drugs beforehand so that I can deal with this vertigo issue a little bit better. And honestly, I just need to spend some more time blue water spearfishing, because it's it's the biggest gap in my experience
Sure.
right now. So I think if I, just put the hours in bobbing around out there, I'm going to harden my brain up to it and
Yeah.
get better at it.
Yeah, the best way to quit being seasick is to be seasick.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the worst thing about it is that you're going to survive.
Yeah, that's my favorite saying. Clients love that. Right about the time they're wiping the puke off their lips, I go, you know what the worst part about being seasick is?
You don't want to, but you're going to.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, I appreciate you so much.
Cool.
And also, just got to give another shout out to Casey on a tremendous achievement of getting an albacore tuna with a spear gun, and to thank him for opening up his home for me and Greg to stay here, and to you for making this trip possible. Thank all of you so much.
Yeah, anytime, man. We're happy to do it. I don't want to speak for Casey, but I think we all had a pretty good time. This was nothing short of epic.
Epic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Thanks, brother. Be
Yep,
good.
thank you.
Bye, everybody. I just want to take a second and thank everyone who's written a review, who has sent mail, who's sent emails, who's sent messages. Your support is incredible. And I also love running into you at trade shows and events and just out on the hillside when we're hunting. I think that that's fantastic. I hope you guys keep adventuring as hard and as often as you can. Art for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Chatelain and was digitized by Celia Harlander. Original music was written and performed by Justin Hay, and the Six Ranch podcast is now produced by Six Ranch Media. Thank you all so much for your continued support of the show, and I look forward to next week when we can bring you a brand new episode.